Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today is August 18th. It's a Tuesday. This is actually episode 80 of TechStrong TV. Wow, that was really quick it seems. But look, we're used to it now. We've got a great show for you lined up today. Before I tell you about today's show, though, I wanted to share with you an announcement that we actually did yesterday on Media Ops, and it's about our next adventure. You know, we suffer from extreme ADD here at Media Ops, always thinking of new things that the market needs. And yesterday we announced something called RecruitOps, RecruitOps.com. And RecruitOps is something that's been a long time coming here at Media Ops. You know, probably the two most frequent questions I get from people, and people reach out to me all the time on, is number one, friends of mine in companies, not just tech vendors, but across the board, healthcare, finance, manufacturing, technology. They can't find enough DevOps people. They can't find enough developers. They can't find enough testers. They can't find enough security people. And they're always, if I can make a recommendation, they're looking for an executive or just, good developers. Or where can they go they have 20 open positions, and how can I help them with that? By the same token, I usually get LinkedIn requests and emails all the time from developers or DevOps folks who maybe recently graduated school or some sort of training or lost their job as a result of what's happening with COVID and everything, and are looking for new positions if I hear anything. We've seen this on our sites for years. We've tried over the years. We started a job board. It was a miserable failure. We made some deals with some of the national job boards and job placement places, and it never seems to pan out. It never seems to kind of solve the issues. You probably had these issues yourself. It's hard finding good people. I've been talking about this problem with my friend Martin Logan, our co-founder, my co-founder here at DevOps.com. Martin owned the DevOps.com domain when we started. And, it was interesting. Martin has the same problem. He's a CTO in a large multinational conglomerate, and he's been a CIO, CTO at large enterprises for years. What Martin wound up doing was he actually would take recruiters and train the recruiters. He would train the recruiters not only on the subject matter expertise for developer, DevOps, cyber jobs, but he would also show them how to look at the culture of an organization to try to find the right match culturally when placing someone in a position. And you know what? Over years, Martin's refined the techniques, and he's got it down. It works. He came to me with this, and it's part of our discussions, and we started planning what became RecruitOps about 6 or 9 months ago. We launched, as I mentioned yesterday. It's at RecruitOps.com. It is a pretty it's a great name. We have the recruiters that Martin has trained, leading things off here, and they, of course, will train more recruiters as we grow. But if you're looking to fill your hard-to-find jobs, or you're someone in the DevOps, cyber, testing, development space looking for a new job, go check out RecruitOps.com and give it a try. You've got nothing to lose. It's a risk-free model. You don't pay RecruitOps unless they find a role, a job, or a person for your job, and they stay there as a given amount of time. So we're excited. We think this is a better way of doing it. Tired of throwing resumes at the wall, tired of the LinkedIn and all of the Indeeds and so forth. Check out RecruitOps and let us know what you think. We're real excited. Anyway, let's get back to what's on our show today. We have today an interview with Ashim Bose from Omnitrax. Omnitrax makes software for trucking fleets. And people often forget the backbone of our country's commerce is trucks. bringing goods from one location to the next. And this is an industry ripe for disruption. And Omnitrax is leading the charge here with some really good AI and just automation and technology. We're not just talking about autonomous vehicles here. We're talking about really, making the logistics better, making your delivery system, your supply chain better. And Ashram's going to share what Omnitrax is doing with that with us. Then I'm also happy to introduce another new company called Kofibi, which is code for engineers by engineers. They're not a new company. They're just new to our audience, perhaps. But I meet with their CEO, James Williams, who has been leading the charge in outsourced engineering coding for 10 years plus now. And he's going to tell us how COVID and everything has actually helped Kofibi, it seems, in terms of, companies adopting their model and utilizing their skills and talents. So good interview there with James Williams. Then I'm joined by my good friend Chris O'Malley. Chris is the CEO of CompuWare, which is of course now an official BMC company. And Chris has always been out front about DevOps for mainframes. And he talks to us a little bit about that, as well as what it's like leading a team through these unusual times. So it's great to catch up with Chris, and we'll have that for you. And then we're going to go to something old. Our something old today comes, as usual, from TechStrong Con. And we're happy to have Paul Stack of the Pulumi folks, and Pulumi's an open source project as well as commercial company, and he's going to give us this is his presentation from TechStrong Con, and it's on why writing infrastructure in general programming language is a better choice for infrastructure in general. Then I'll be back with the news, then turn things over to, of course, Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene actually has an interview today with Ali Parker of Redgate Software. And then I'll be back to introduce Mitch over at the Analyst Corner with some great commentary. And then as a bonus today, we have our friend Mike Vizard, Channels Roundup. And Mike has from BuildKite, Lachlan Donald, and I think they're announcing more funding. So a lot of funding news coming out in the last week or so. I'll be back to wrap things up after that. It's going to be a great Tuesday here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a quick break now. We'll be right back. Hey, Alan Schimmel back here now. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Asham Bose for Omnitrax. Omnitrax is a company that's kind of leading the charge in bringing better technology and automation to trucking fleet operations. This is something that's ripe for disruption, a lot of room for an improvement, and Asham's going to tell us about it in this interview.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back here for another segment on TechStrong TV. This segment's going to be a little different. I'm not going to talk to you about cloud native and Kubernetes or CI/CD or something like that. Something that I find I find very interesting, probably a little more interesting even than some of the very highly technical kind of software subjects we usually talk about. I want to introduce you to my guest. His name is Ashim Bose, and he's from a company called Omnitrax. And Ashim, welcome. Welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you. Good to be here, Alan.
Thanks. Nice to have you here. So Ashim, I didn't say your title because it wasn't just one, two. Why don't you share your title with our audience? I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, I'm the Chief Data Scientist and Vice President for Data and AI at Omnitrax. Omnitrax is a trucking solutions provider, and we do a number of things for the trucking industry, which, is in a lot of ways, is the lifeblood of the economy, So more than happy to get into more detail as we go through the conversation.
Sure. And you're right, the trucking industry is kind of the backbone of our transportation and logistics system that, and it's never been more apparent, unfortunately, than, over the past few months with COVID and everything. And we see, supply chains, just how fragile our supply chains are, how quickly we can run out of something silly as toilet paper, and how, scary it gets. Can we keep the food? Because the way our food system works, it's almost like a just-in-time inventory, right? And so if things get out of whack there, it can get pretty ugly pretty quickly. But Ashim, there's big, not with the COVID, but even before COVID, and it'll be after COVID, God willing. There's big change afoot in the trucking industry, in the transportation industry. What people used to think of as, hasn't changed since the advent of the horseless carriage, right? You got a human driving a vehicle. Sometimes we put two trailers on the vehicle, and that was a major thing, right? We got a double trailer on a truck, and so they could carry twice as much goods, and that was revolutionary. But technology is about to really be a game changer here. And why don't we talk a little bit about what you guys do at Omnitrax that's really changing the game in trucking?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of trucking, it is a very complex ecosystem, as you noted, and what we are focused on is the telematics piece and the data piece, the analytics and AI piece, which manifest themselves in a lot of different ways in the day in the life of the trucker, if you will, all the way from providing workflow guidance to figuring out the health of their truck to the planning and scheduling, dispatch, routing, navigation. So there's a number of things that are important in the day of the life, if you will, of a trucker. And we essentially provide solutions that go in the cab, that talk to the back end, if you will, and enable a lot of those use cases that I just mentioned. And at the end of the day, if you think about trucking, while the focus is on moving goods from point A to point B, there's a huge focus on safety, on productivity, on efficiency. It's a highly competitive space. Every penny counts. Fuel consumption and the savings therein, making things more efficient, reducing the number of unplanned stoppages and things like that. So there are a number of elements that come in that make this space amenable to the application of a lot of analytics, AI, intelligence, if you will, to help our customers go about their business on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. So Anish, not Anish, I'm sorry, Ashim, in my mind, the biggest thing probably that lurks out there is this whole idea of autonomy, autonomous trucks, right? We're going to somehow take the humans out of the cab and just really allow our computers and our logistics systems to manage everything from not only what's on the truck, but when it gets delivered, what route it takes to actually driving the truck. Now, for some, that sounds like fantasy. For others, hey, bring it on, right? Where are we on that kind of future, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alan. There are varying stages of autonomy, right? The industry talks about level 0 through level 5, where 5 is fully autonomous, and there are, the intermediate phases are partial autonomy, if you will. So this, as an industry, and by the way, I've spent a fair amount of time within the autonomy piece of automotive and transportation. As an industry, we are very much in R&D phase still. There's a lot of work going on in tweaking the models, the algorithms, making sure, we're collecting the right data on the edge, in the vehicle, so to speak, and then running a lot of the analytics and AI right on the edge in the vehicle. So there's a lot of research going on, and the OEMs are very much focused on this. Our belief is that autonomous will come to cars before it comes to trucks. There is a lot of additional complexity when you're dealing with the size, the loads, and the overall complexity of the trucking industry compared to a relatively simpler car industry type use case. There are many benefits to autonomy, no doubt, and we're going to start seeing that being rolled out in the next few years, enabling a safer driving experience, a more productive driving experience in the cab as the trucks get to the partial autonomy, allowing the driver and their companions in the cab to do more value-added things, and less worry about keeping having a focus on the tactical items that they're dealing with today. So we see autonomy coming in over time, and there's going to be an adoption curve. So it's not like somebody's going to flip the switch and all of a sudden everything's autonomous as far as trucking goes. It will come in steps, and we see those steps starting to manifest themselves in about 5 years. But by the time we get full autonomy, we are looking at a much longer timeline, if you will.
Give us an idea if you can. Are we talking 50 years, 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, there are a lot of variables that come in terms of regulation, in terms of the roadways, the adoption of newer technologies, higher bandwidth technologies that will enable, communication between the cab and the back end as well as the other cabs, if you will. So there are a lot of variables we're dealing with, and our prediction, and this is just me talking here, based on my knowledge of the industry, I'm thinking 15 years, 20 years.
Okay. So that's 15, I don't know if I'll be here, but that's all great. What about, let's talk a little bit more short term, right? How is technology changing things today, hopefully for the better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I'm a big believer in the use cases that the technology enables, as kind of the starting point. So, technology today, especially with the advent of data and AI and connected car and these types of other technologies coming in that are benefiting our customers, it's being used to automate manual processes, provide predictive and prescriptive intelligence, better consolidate and leverage data from multiple sources. And I'll give you a few examples. In terms of intelligence in the cab itself, we're using sensors, cameras, etc., to help mitigate risk around safety, collision warning, distracted driving, overspeeding, sharp turns, hard braking, what we call critical events in the industry. These can be reduced with technology. And, this is a big deal within trucking because, the insurance premiums on these things are huge. And every time there's an accident, on average, there is 175,000 approximately spent on, addressing
Really?
the accidents.
Wow.
It's a pretty large number.
Yeah, it's a big number.
Yeah. And so when we talk about risk mitigation, safety, improving safety, etc. Technology is playing a big part in that, in the cab itself, which is, as we call it, on the edge, if you will. And then we can take it to the back office as well. When we look at productivity, workflows, routing, location intelligence, compliance, there are a number of things we are doing with technology on the back end that are helping our customers run their businesses better. For example, we're doing a lot of work on location intelligence. We're applying AI and ML to figuring out the locations of the docks where the truck needs to go to deliver its goods or to pick up goods. And more often than not, the dock locations are not at the front door, as we all know. They're on the back side of the warehouse, if you will.
Yep.
If you use the traditional GPS routing tool, you're going to show up on the front, and then you realize that you actually need to go back out and go around town in some cases to get to where the back is, where you need to get to. Hugely inefficient, a huge waste of time, fuel, which we're trying to reduce. So we're trying to apply technology to figure out the locations of the docks as we look at the breadcrumb data from the vast amounts of data we collect, and provide guidance as to what the best route is to where the customer really needs to get to versus where a lot of the mapping applications will take you. All of this is, of course, based on more data being available, more compute power being available, the connectedness of the vehicles to the back office, and last but not least, the prepackaged algorithms that are available today in the cloud. As an example, you mentioned cloud early on. So all of these are coming together to enable us to work on things that are very much bottom line and top line focused in terms of adding value to our customers.
Excellent. Excellent. It's true. You said something before that the cab is sort of the new edge or the edge, in this equation, and the back office is always the back office, right? It's the center, whether it be maybe in the cloud or not today. And the driver's kind of the endpoint, right? And it just like we see in computing in general, that edge computing is becoming very important. And one of the things, whether it's what they say, right? Is a Tesla a car wrapped around a battery, or a computer wrapped around a car, right? And it's the same really kind of thing that's going on in modern trucks today. Is it a truck wrapped around a vehicle wrapped around a computer, right? In terms of the computer kind of determining, not just safety and whether a driver is paying attention or stuff like that, but the logistics and how that factors in, like almost on a minute by minute basis, right? And everything else. So these aren't, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but these aren't Teamsters from the Jimmy Hoffa movies who are, just driving old rigs up and down the highways here, right? Today's trucks and how they're connected is a very different animal. And yeah, and subsequently, drivers need to be more sophisticated about it, right? It can't be just, the only thing I worry about is having my CDL and driving, and I know what highway to take. That I have GPS for. But they've got to be savvy to the equipment in there to use it well, right? And so, when we talk about, everybody needs a college education today. Everyone doesn't need a college education, but even driving a truck, which some may think, doesn't really need much training beyond driving. You know what? You need to be familiar with the technology you're living with in that cab. And you may not need a college degree per se, but you need some expertise.
Yeah, and the good thing is, the adoption curve is, accelerating as well when it comes to technology, thanks to the iPhone and the Android phone. As you look to the next gen, they're so comfortable with technology. whether they have a college education or not. It almost like there's an expectation that, hey, why
You're tech
can't
savvy.
the work tools be kind of similar to the tools I'm using in my personal life?
Yep, and that's where it is. Shim, we're about out of time. For people who want to get more information about the company, where could they go?
They could go to our website, www.omnitrax.com.
That's TRAX.
Yeah, OMNITRACS.
CS. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do a number of things, which we didn't touch upon. So, our website is a good place to get started to figure out everything we do.
There's only so much you could do in 15, 20 minutes, but it's enough to get them started. Do go check out the website. Keep up the great work. It's good to hear what sometimes we forget that all these little code and data ops and DevOps and stuff that we work on manifests itself in the real world. And we're, no pun intended, but where rubber meets the road, and this is a perfect example of it. So thank you very much for being our guest. It's Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with another guest.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
In this next interview, I want to introduce you to James Williams, the CEO of Cofibi. James is an interesting fellow, has a long track record as an engineer, helped take companies public and exits, and very successful. He started Cofibi, that's coding for engineers by engineers, years and years ago. And they've built just an amazing team of engineers and coders that are providing outsourced services to companies around the world. James is going to tell us about that, about how things are in light of COVID, and it's a great interview. Now here is my interview with James Williams.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel. You're watching another segment here on TechStrong TV. Happy you're here to join us. I have with me today James Williams. James's company is Cofibi. James, I'm going to ask you to spell it, but first of all, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate being here, and I can definitely provide a spelling. So Cofibi is spelled C-O-F-E-B-E.
Absolutely. And James, we never introduced Cofibi to our audience before, so I'm going to ask you to give us a little Cofibi background, and if you can wind in your own background with that. And I think we probably want to know where the name Cofibi comes from.
Yeah, let's start there. So Cofibi,
Okay.
Cofibi is an acronym. It stands for Code for Engineers by Engineers. And really the company was started out of a passion for having an engineering run organization. We asked ourselves an essential question. What would it be like if you had a company that was run by engineers like the old day, where the engineers got the benefit of all of the things that come from building products and building services to delight customers? So we were kicking names around in the room, and we were trying combinations of our last names and all kinds of craziness. And I said, really what we want to embody is code for engineers by engineers. And someone said, well, that spells Cofibi. And we just said, let's go with it. So essentially, we're a company of computer scientists and engineers. And we like to affectionately believe that, we bring the gift of computer science to technology. We bring the, take apart your Atari. I'm going to date myself here, and see how it's all put together. So we brought a group of those guys together to come and sort of build technology. Our goal is to build a company that brings services or brings the expertise of engineering, software engineering, and computer science to the market, but also to use our services business to build our product business, which is a business around building software developer tools. So embodied in that name, Code for Engineers by Engineers, is that we would deliver our products to our own market, which is software engineers. My background, just to be brief, I've been a professional engineer since around 1993. I've taken one company public, sold two. I've been a consultant at Google, and so I've done nothing else and don't know how to do anything else but software engineering.
And there's nothing the matter with that, man. Nothing the matter with that at all. What a great story. And just so you're new to our audience in that we've never interviewed you or covered Kofibi before, but the company is not, it wasn't formed yesterday. This company's been around now. I forgot, I know we spoke about it. Was it 10 years, 12 years, some decent amount of time?
Yeah, so we relaunched in 2013. If you go look us up, we've been in business since 2004. But this sort of concept of being an engineering-run organization where we wanted to build our own products, that really started. The genesis of that was in 2013, and we've been at it. I mean, you and I talked briefly about what it's like to run a business and the founder paradox. So we've been through all the bumps in the road that occur when you run your own business.
Absolutely. Another thing though, James, a friend of mine who I know in the security world forever put a tweet out about how like today's generation of security people are so different than security people when I first got involved, maybe let's say 20 years ago, right? In that 20 years ago, the average security person was very much like the average engineer you just described. They got into security because they like to break things. And then they'd figure out what made it break and how to protect it from getting broken again, right? How to take something apart and how to put it back together better. And there was a big sort of like self-education aspect to being a software coder, right? Another quick example, I did a DevOps Unbound series show about 2-3 weeks ago. Two people at the pinnacle of the software testing community. One guy had his PhD in testing. He was a PhD doctor, and it was in software testing. The other guy was a high school dropout and became one of the youngest testing managers at Apple, like in 1987, and has gone on to literally write the books on software testing. They came from very, very different paths, but both reached the top of their profession here. We see similar, like the kind of path that you took in your career, the kind of idea of, hey, let's sit around here, take something apart, figure out how it works and put it back together better even, right? We can do it. We have the tech. Today, it's a different world. I think a lot of people come out with, very standardized training and they jump right into that world of kind of applying what they learned, if you will.
100%. I think there's all types of engineers. Our philosophy is the engineer that would do it for free, not that any engineer should work for free, but the engineer who's tinkering on the weekend, whether it's software or whether it's hardware, that's what we look for in our interview. We look for that spark in the eye, the guy who says, I'd write Angular myself. I wanted to really go and explore how containers work. I did a cloud migration in the middle of Saturday night just because I wanted to. When I was 9, that's what got me into it. I literally took a screwdriver, got in trouble for it, took the Atari apart just because I wanted to see, what it would be like to make a game. And then out of ignorance, I just unscrewed the thing. So I think you're right. I mean, there's many pathways to becoming successful and to sort of honing your passion. But what a lot of great engineers have in common is just that ability to break things and put it back together. And then the patterns that you find are so exciting and phenomenal, but those patterns that you find by breaking something and putting it back together usually become, sort of the genesis of ideas that you use to build software in the future.
Absolutely. So Steve, at Kofibi, James, excuse me, at Kofibi, give us an idea of the kind of projects you guys are engaged in with folks now.
Yeah, so we have a wide range. So we've done everything from aerospace programming. We do a lot of front end and mobile applications. We've done dating sites. As of lately, we've been deep into mortgage. I'd like to say that, I had a vision that mortgage would be hot. I didn't. It sort of landed in our laps. But what we bring to the table is just, I don't want to say a generic engineer in the sense that these guys don't specialize, but we bring problem solvers to the table. But we're deep into mortgage. We're deep into mobile, and we've done a ton of cloud migrations and sort of cloud work. So the entire ecosystem around CI/CD, AWS, Azure, Google, and all of that. I like to tell my friends, we're the team that people call when things really go wrong in the middle of the night. And so we pride ourselves in being able to solve those problems and then be an extension of your business strategy relative to software development.
Excellent. So I guess I got to ask you, just because it's obvious, which is, with everything going on in the world, COVID-wise and everything, how has that affected business, right? It's hard to go, you can't go to someone's office and shake their hand, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
how's that affect? But on the other hand, look, people, they need it and they need it now, kind of, especially with around transformation, cloud migration. How's it affected business? How have you guys responded?
Well, I have to say that starting with my team first, I think my team of engineers, they've been exceptional. I think from a business cadence perspective and our ability to continue to do great work for our customers, kudos to my team. I mean, we quickly rallied. We followed the news like every other organization, I'm sure. And our number one goal is keeping everyone safe. How do we feel safe? How do we keep people's families safe? And then how do we continue to respect the business and what we're all here to do? So I think from, definitely a round of applause for the team in terms of, their ability to stay focused through troubled times. From a business development perspective and growing and continuing to sustain a business, I'm sure you have the same problem. And we've had to do a lot of video, a lot of verbal handshakes. I have done a very, very few coffee shop meetings sitting sort of 8 feet apart. But we're lucky to have trusted partnerships, before COVID, and we've been able to nurture those relationships through COVID, and it's really helped us. I mean, we're really lucky. I know there's a lot of businesses out there who've gone, it's gone wrong for them, and we're really appreciative of the relationships that we do have.
Okay, good stuff. So, this COVID thing isn't going to last forever, God willing. But how is your business going to be different forever, if you will? Right? How has this changed the business fundamentally for you?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I think what we've proven, I mean, we literally had a conversation, do we really need our office anymore? I mean, the team is so effective. So, do we really need
We've had the same conversation.
Yeah, what we really miss is, you can't take away the water cooler conversation. So right. That really is a thing. People sporadically going to lunch, Nerf gun fights in the office, ping pong, someone pissed off because someone ate their lunch in the fridge. All of those things are great to building a culture, but we've really woven in video to everything that we do. 99% of all of our meetings are on a Zoom call like this, we do it at weird hours. But I think where it's changed forever is that we've proven that we can fundamentally work from anywhere. It's also changed our mind on how we look, where we would look for talent. to make Kofibi better. So the globe has gotten bigger from us, but I think our team has proven that engineers can be highly focused, and our primary tools are Slack and Zoom.
It's the same. And I think it's not just engineers. I think if you're hiring adults and they like doing their job, it really makes no difference. You do lose the water cooler stuff. You do lose the lunch together, maybe going out on a Friday night after work together kind of thing. But beyond that, we haven't really lost much of a beat either with everyone remote. And I sit here looking at 5,000 square feet of office space that's empty, and 3.5 years on my lease.
You know what? That's a similar number. We have 3 years on our lease as well, and we spent a lot of time, cultivating that space and making it a great place to work.
Oh no, we have a great place. I had just opened a huge big room. It was an extra thousands, just one room that was 1,000 foot, because we don't have open space. Everyone had offices.
Wow.
We have this big open space. I put up a huge 75-inch TV in there, and we've got like tables that are kind of on wheels that you can rearrange. So it was going to be a cool place, as because we're adding new people all the time. No one's ever used it, James. It's going to wind up being a gigantic man cave for me at some point, I think. It's crazy. But yeah, I think you and I don't think our organizations are alone. I think there's a very, very common thing. Let's talk a little bit about, like you mentioned, you guys are big in mortgages. So obviously mortgage rates are at all-time low, right? I got to assume that that's creating a lot of demand for mortgages. I know me personally, we were going through a refi with a large national provider that I'm not going to name because they're so terrible at getting this refi through. I was approved a while ago and waiting, literally, it's going on 4 or 5 months with them. They just got so hit with COVID and their systems were so screwed up from where, unable to work remote that it ground to a halt. And can I tell you, this is a top 3 bank.
Yeah.
Literally a top 3 bank. And, what are you doing to help, like in the mortgage industry, for instance? What are you doing to help there?
Well, I mean, as you might imagine in mortgage, mortgage is ripe for innovation and disruption. We're talking about one of the oldest institutions, not only in this country, but in every country. And what we're seeing is mortgage kind of woke up in the morning and decided it needed to be more modernized. So things like initial disclosures and the automations of initial disclosures. Initial disclosures are those big packages that you get where you consent to this and you consent to that. And so there's a big question in mortgage. How do we do that digitally? How do we make the life of the loan officer easier, but more importantly, how do we make it easy for the borrower to, if you will, do a mortgage from their phone and get all of the updates? So where we come in is we've got a lot of DNA in cloud migrations and scalable systems. I mean, if there was something you would pick Kofibi for, it's the hard scalable problems and things around automation. So where we're helping is, how do you create a process where you start a mortgage process on your phone, you get an account check or you get qualified, and then from getting qualified, you get all of the documents and the ability to do a digital signature all the way through loan origination. So that chasm between the borrower says, I want a refi or I want a mortgage, to loan origination, there's a lot of technical pieces from here to there, and there's a lot of back-end subsystems integrating with, in many cases, with a lot of, let's call it, not modernized systems today. And how do you take something that's not so modern, scale it, not crash and burn the thing while borrowers are leveraging it is where we come in. And there's, I would say, small lenders to big lenders, you'd be surprised. There's a lot of old dead bodies in their technology stacks, and we're happy to come in and help those customers.
Excellent, man. I may have a new client for you there. I'm going to go let them know. But anyway,
Yeah.
Hey, James, we're about out of time. It goes quick here. I as I mentioned to you, I apologize. But spell it again one more time for us.
Yeah, Kofibi is COFEBE.
All right. Anybody out here looking for kind of a highly skilled engineering team to come in and do the job code-wise, Check them out, my friend James Williams. James, thanks for joining us. We'll have you back on sometime, and we'll talk some more about this stuff.
Absolutely. We're looking forward to it. Thank you.
All righty. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
As you probably know, CompuWare was acquired by BMC a few months ago. Chris O'Malley, however, has stayed on as the CEO of CompuWare, which is run as a separate entity. It's CompuWare, a BMC company. And Chris is still doing what he does best, which is leading the charge in mainframe for DevOps and evangelizing it. But he's also found himself in a kind of different position in that he's trying to keep the troops rallied and motivated, and the team continuing to outperform the industry over at CompuWare. In this interview, we check out what some of Chris's tips on how he does it and what we can expect in mainframe for DevOps.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, DevOps.com, Media Ops here on TechStrong TV, and we've got another great interview for you for this segment. I'm joined by an old friend of mine. Well, he's not old, but I know him a long time. Chris O'Malley, CEO of CompuWare, a BMC company. We should add that the comma BMC company is official now. Hey, Chris, welcome. Good to see you.
It's great to be here, Alan. Always good to see you.
Absolutely. So, Chris, as I said, it's CompuWare, a BMC company. The deal is closed. I think we interviewed Ayman Zari, the CEO of BMC, probably I'm going to say almost 2 months ago to talk about it.
Yes, beginning of July.
Yep. Yeah, and here we are. More than halfway through August. Chris, how's it been? I mean, now that there's always that period of adjustment and everything.
Yeah, no, I think the merger of the two was really centered on customers, and they're the most important party, I guess, in this new beginning, if you will, for the mainframe. So, we kind of like-minded. We're both innovative forces within the market. We're both, obviously obsessed about customers. We both see unmet needs in the market that need to be solved as we try to bring the mainframe into the realm of Agile and DevOps. So, all of our time in these, a little less than 2 months has been on looking at roadmaps, talking to customers, getting their thoughts and concerns on the table, and really energizing ourselves to create, the best of what CompuWare has been, the best of what BMC's been, into a, force that's going to be the best mainframe partner for the next 50 years. So, that really has been our focus, and that's inspiring to me. I mean, CompuWare has done some great things in the last 5 years. I mean, if you go back 5 years ago, DevOps in the mainframe and Agile on the mainframe was, in most people's minds, an impossibility. Now you're seeing it happening all over the globe. We had to solve problems in developer experience. We had to solve problems in doing parallel development, creating CI/CD pipelines in the mainframe. We had to figure out a way to do automated testing on the mainframe. We had to figure out a way to get data to the managers within the mainframe ranks so that they could drive continuous improvement, to treat those folks like high performance athletes. All of those things had to be solved. And at the same time, in a parallel universe, BMC was solving issues for DBAs, around ops, in the areas of workload automation. So the bringing the two together as a force to be reckoned with for customers is an awesome thing to be part of.
Absolutely. And I don't want to make you blush or embarrass you, but quite frankly, I mean, without you personally, pushing this and evangelizing and out there kind of, leading chin first a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
With this, hey, we're going to, God damn it, we're going to take you into the modern world whether you like it or not, right? Kicking and screaming, but you're going to get there. And due to your efforts a lot, that why we can talk about this now, right? I mean, you look at BMC, a perfect example. Always had a huge presence in the mainframe market, right? A huge money maker for them, but you didn't think of them when you thought about DevOps and Agile and these new ways of doing things on a mainframe, right? It took a tough, a scrappy kid in the town, to come to town and make it happen, and that was you. So much of that success, I think, comes to you personally, and congratulations for it.
Just to say, first, thank you. That's it's a humbling thing coming from you. I appreciate it very much. The thing that I tell people is what makes or gives us strength, gives me strength, is the fact we got truth on our side. I mean, the things that I say are common sense. The things that I say are based on fact. You fight against, mainframe naysayers, that in a lot of instances come from vendors. It's the cloud vendors and, it's the analysts within the market that make a lot of money when people try to re-platform things, and they make money when those people fail, right? So they've got a lot of energy to combat the idea of relooking at the mainframe as a modern platform, relooking at the mainframe as a first-class citizen in the efforts of banks and insurance companies to compete and succeed. So thank you. But I mean, I have the truth on my side. And I think what we've done in being a stronger voice is we've given other people confidence. You've talked about the fact that you see more and more strength as it relates to the mainframe and interest around the platform. I think more and more people are feeling like, hey, this thing ain't going anywhere, but for all the right business reasons. So let's stop apologizing for it. Let's get excited about how do we leverage its strengths, and things like transactional reliability and security and performance, transactional efficiency. The mainframe is by far and away the best systems of record platform in the world. So let's take advantage of that and stop apologizing for it. And I think more and more people are just recognizing that's the right path forward. And it's humbling for me to be a voice in that in terms of the extent that we've done. But I think the best years for the mainframe are ahead of us. And I think more and more people are becoming equal evangelists to myself and saying the truth about the platform.
Excellent. And you're right, but there's always going to be people who blaze the trail, and good work there. Chris, I got a couple areas I wanted to kind of hear your opinion on. Number one is, look, I'm interviewing you from your home. The whole world is home. This whole COVID thing is just surreal in many respects, right? Yeah.
That's great.
How do you think it's affected kind of the mainframe and DevOps and kind of your, beyond the obvious in your world personally, but from a business point of view, how's it affecting things?
I think it both helps and hurts. I think this idea of intrinsic automation, right? To try to automate everything and make the days more similar rather than being dissimilar. Things like fast feedback. All of those things, when we all went remote, were incredibly helpful in sustaining, certainly the things that we're trying to do from a digital nature. But when you disperse everybody, I mean, we are humans, right? And innovation, requires proximity, and there's a lot of unresolved issues that you've got to do as it relates to the mainframe or non-mainframe systems. So the longer this goes, I think it slows innovation. The collaboration, talking about problems, feedback from customers, is all made a little bit more difficult under this situation. But I think the byproduct at the end of this will be one where, boy, we need DevOps and Agile. I mean, the idea of working in big batches and long release cycles, I mean, I think those customers that are continuing to try to do that in this kind of virtual state that we're working are seeing this isn't going to work. I mean, how do you manage people when you're doing waterfall big batch work and knowing things better today, worse today, better, and you have no idea. You can't see people, you can't really interact with people in ways that allow your gut instincts to carry itself as being the right actions that you take. So I think people are going to say, boy, the old way of doing things, that's got to get rid of it. They're also going to see, we got to get more innovative. We got to look at what our customers want, the needs that they've got. We got to be better at responding to it. So I think physical proximity, I think people are going to understand that this is really important. Working in isolation over the long term is just not a good thing. So, again, for us, it's been at CompuWare interesting because, we're seeing, deals with government agencies happen in like 1/10 the time that they formerly did, because they're seeing the need to do things like parallel development and being able to branch work and reconstitute. Those things they may have labored through deciding for years and years in the old way where, good enough is good enough. Today, good enough is no longer good enough. We have to work in a different way. The way we work day to day has got to change. So it's certainly helping our business in terms of the urgency, and you're seeing more and more customers adopting DevOps and Agile in the mainframe platform because of COVID. But, again, I'm just a big believer that proximity matters. Being with people, seeing them, talking about problems, doing it in a, not a planned way, but just serendipitous way. Those are big parts of what makes, the energy of these companies and serving customers better over time. So I certainly, personally, I want to get back to work. I want to see the folks again.
You and me both, Chris. You and me both. I mean, as we were talking off camera, and I mentioned to you, I have the kind of CEO's prerogative. I threw everyone else out, and I come to the office, but not, So we're a small company. We're not CompuWare or BMC. I bought all of the artwork in my office, and we have some nice artwork here, right? And the stuff in the kitchen and this big new sort of room we had built out that no one's ever even been in yet. It kind of bums me out, right? That we have this great infrastructure here that I'm not even using. I'm paying for every month, but not using. I don't know when we will, right? My people have already, thank God we function well with what we're doing remotely. And everyone said, look, when and if we ever go back to an office, we'll come in 1 or 2 days a week, but we could work from home. And I don't disagree with them. Chris is a CEO, right? Sometimes you gotta, if everything's going fine, don't fix what's not broke, as they say. So, but yeah, I just had this discussion in the CISO discussion we were having prior to recording this session, which is, it's going to be like this forever. Right? Not the COVID. Thank God, hopefully that goes away. But the idea of more people working from home more often than they did before is not going to go back anytime soon.
But as a CEO, you got to consider the fact that, at least from my perspective, that there's 3 things that matter in business, absolutely, and have been that way for 1,000 years and will be for the next 1,000. Those 3 things are customer sat, employee engagement, right? They get the passion, the perseverance, the courage of your employees, and then long-term cash flow. You've got to be worried about employee engagement in a world where people aren't together. I've seen a world where people work from home, and I've seen a world where they work together. And if innovation is an important part of what you do, inventing new things, right? If you're a maintenance company and you're really living in a stasis state and it's the status quo, you're going out of business. But I guess that's an acceptable way to run it. But
every day you're dying.
Yeah, so you can work however you want. But if you're trying to grow, you really got to worry about employee engagement a lot. And we're humans. We learn together. We fail together. We try together. We celebrate together. That's an important part of being an innovator. So, you may think things have changed forever, but I guarantee you employee engagement is still going to be one of the 3 most important things you have to worry about.
Absolutely. So here's a lesson I've learned, Chris, on employee engagement as a CEO or a manager. You don't have to be CEO, but, as a manager, I think you need to work harder right now on employee engagement. I go out of we do a daily meeting, for instance, every day at 10. We still do our weekly meeting, but I go out of my way every day, right? And I sort of have the rotating list. Who did I touch, right? Just to say, hey, man, we're here. And then I speak to my other, we're not that big, but, I have an executive team who have people working for them. How is your team going on, right? I speak to all my exec team members every day, but how is your team going? Are you in contact with them? So this is a burden on managers in this environment, that if you want that kind of employee engagement that you mentioned, Chris, and I don't disagree, you got to work harder at it today. It's not as simple as I saw you at the men's room or at the water cooler or something.
And I think, we talk about internally CompuWare and BMC is, you're not a manager anymore. You got to be a coach, and you got to be an informed coach. And an informed coach is incredibly difficult when you don't see anybody, right? Everybody is remote to you. So we have a technology called Z-Advisor, which is basically the collection of software delivery data, right? So that we look at everything and anything we do all day long, every day. And we look at the translation of that in terms of velocity, quality, and efficiency, in terms of its product, the outcome of that work. And we were doing that for 3 years before COVID hit. So, we had a good sense of kind of the beginning of a quarter. We do these quarterly releases. So every quarter, the beginning of the quarter is kind of the same. In the middle of it, it's kind of the same. So we have a sense of what normal looks like. We also have a good sense of where our constraints are, where our bottlenecks are, what things need to be improved. So when COVID hit, right, we now have a basis of knowing, are we doing okay? Everybody's kind of dispersed. Is the end of the quarter deliverable going to be what we expect it to be? Are we losing our employee engagement? Are we losing productivity? Are things, so we had a good sense of knowing whether things were okay, not okay, and where to focus on making and taking corrective action as a coach would, right? Not a manager, not work harder, work fast. It's working with people to understand, given that they have to work in a different way, that they're living in trials and tribulations of all these bad things that are happening. How do we help them? How do we make it better? So data as kind of a replacement of what you learn at the water cooler is incredibly important. And the Z-Advisor has saved us in a lot of ways, so that that we've had now one full quarter where we did a drop on July 1st. We were more productive in that quarter, right, than we had been historically. You're taking away the commutes. You're doing things that are making it easier for people. Our concerns, though, as long as time goes on, because you make 1,000 decisions for every $1 million you spend, and you make a lot of little ones. Those little ones have to be informed, and I'm scared when people are all working from home, they're less informed over time. So we're thinking real hard of how do we keep, our understanding, our experimentation constantly going, sharing that, so that, again, every drop that we do is taking even a further step forward in terms of bringing innovation to the mainframe platform. So, it's not like being a good manager. You got to be a good coach, but you got to be an informed coach. So you absolutely need this data. And Z-Advisor has been a godsend to our customers too, because they're seeing now, how did things work before COVID and after? We just did a town hall yesterday. We talked. There's customers that have had radical changes of performance pre and post. Some got better, some got markedly worse. So you would not know that, though, independent of the data. Nobody's coming to you saying I'm less productive. No one would say that. So you want to love your employees, right? They're going through hard times too, but we're all human, and sometimes circumstances like this can make us less productive. You want that coach, that loving coach, to know as much about you as you do about yourself, and help you to get better. So we've learned that this data is massively important in this new order of things.
Agreed. I also wonder about the sustainability of all of it, right? All right, so I'm not commuting, so I'm working 2 hours more because I spend 2 hours a day commuting, and all of these kind of things in there. But at the end of the day, fine for a quarter, 2 quarters even, but can I keep doing that 3 quarters from now, a year out from now, 2 years from now? I think, we saw it here where we went through that first quarter that you're talking about, I called it the hair on fire quarter. Right? Everyone was running around with their hair on fire, doing as much as they can, as fast as they can. So I've coached, Chris, you don't know this about me, but I've coached kids in sports for 15 years. I stopped when both boys went to college, but I did football, basketball, little baseball. I called timeout, right? I called timeout on the whole team. I said, I want everyone to take off the next 2 days. It was a Thursday or Friday. I don't want anyone checking email. Everybody put autoresponders on. We're going on autopilot for 2 days. Come back Monday, and let's talk about what the next month looks like and what the next quarter is going to look. We had a great quarter. You guys did great, but we need to breathe. We need to look at this without our hair on fire. And so we transitioned rather quickly into a new normal, as we called it. I think a lot of companies have gone through a similar kind of process, right? And if you have the data like you're talking about from a Z Advisor kind of program where it's always nice to have the metrics, to have the data, right, that you can make informed decisions. But I think sometimes as a coach, it's in your gut too, that you know when you got to drive your team hard and when you got to give them that break, and it's part of being a good manager, coach, CEO, and everything else.
One thing I'll just add to what you're saying. Certainly, when it first started, everybody was panicked, and we try to tell our employees when it first started that be vigilant, but don't be fearful. I mean, we're humans. We got to live our lives, and we got to be vigilant about washing our hands and doing things. But so there's a lot of concern right at the outset, and I do think you got to let people kind of naturally calm themselves, but you get to a point as the time goes on where you got to get focused, right? I mean, urgency, passion, courage. These things are what drives a company forward, because when I'm very clear with the copywriter employees, we only exist at the pleasure of our customers. I mean, they have to be happy, and we got to recognize they're always beautifully and wonderfully dissatisfied, and in that dissatisfied state, which they'll always have, God bless them, because that's what helps us.
The nature of the beast.
Well, that's what helps us to invent and get better over time. So we, as a company, have got to be fixated on our constraints. We've got to be fixated on our bottlenecks. We've got to be fixated on what's in that roadmap and making it the best it possibly can. So sometimes you're right. You got to take a little bit of the pressure off the system because people were scared. But right now, we are aggressively getting back to, let's look at these constraints. What are the bottlenecks? What are our deliverables? How do we know that we're doing the right thing? How can we prove to ourselves that we're going to satisfy the customers with the next deliverable? So, I'm definitely now turning up the heat, if you will, to making sure that we're doing the right things. Because we got work to do. We got to reinvent the future of the mainframe, and that's a hard thing to do, man. So we are keyed up and ready to go. So, sometimes you got to take off the pressure. Sometimes you got to put the pressure on. I think right now, you got to put the pressure on. So that's exciting part of this business. You got to make those calls.
It really is. It really is. Hey, Chris, we're actually over time, but that's okay. First of all, man, keep doing what you're doing, reinventing the future of the mainframe in real time. So keep it up. It's a pleasure seeing you. Great having you on the show. Come back and visit us again soon. I don't think the last time I spoke with you, Chris, it was probably maybe when the BMC deal was announced. So that's got to be closer to 6 months ago, even something like that, right? So don't be away so long. Come back, okay?
Anytime you want to talk to me, I'll be here.
All right. Chris O'Malley, CEO, evangelist of the DevOps and mainframe world of CompuWare, a BMC company. We'll mention that. Chris, thanks very much. This is Alan Schimmel. We're on TechStrong TV. We'll be back in a moment. Okay, for something old, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we're going back to TechStrong Con and a Paul Stack of Pulumi. Pulumi is a great open source tool as well as the commercial company. In this interview, or in this session from TechStrong Con, Paul Stack presents infrastructure as software and talks about different languages and why you should use them in when you're coding infrastructure as code. So here's Paul Stack from Pulumi.
So thank you for joining me for my session, which is called Infrastructure as Software. My name is Paul Stack. I work for a company called Pulumi, and we believe we are the next company in the evolution of infrastructure as software, infrastructure as code. We are in the era of cloud transition, as we know, and there are different versions of the cloud transition scale that people are going through. Right now we have version 1, there are people at version 1 who are at the first wave of the transition. They have effectively picked up their private data center and moved to the cloud, and everything is traditional end-tier style architecture. So we have application web servers and we have database servers, and they're probably managed by a configuration management tool like Puppet or Chef or Ansible or something like this. And this is very effective for them because they've been able to take exactly what they have in their physical data center and move it into the cloud. Then we have people at version 2 of the cloud transition, people who are starting to take advantage of managed services and maybe experiment with containers. And they're in this hybrid zone of private public cloud, but also a bit more interconnected services. And then we have version 3, where we have what's called fully modern infrastructure. So, everything is microservice-based style architecture. It's mostly using containers and probably using a scheduler, maybe taking advantage of some serverless, and definitely taking advantage of some hosted services. Pulumi believe that we enable Cloud v3 by default. And so what we actually allow you to do is be able to take advantage of building these hyper-connected architectures. By enabling operators and developers to use modern languages, like actual programming languages, in order to program what they need to do, and be able to create layers of abstraction and APIs across many clouds, which actually allow people to unify their tools within their system. So a very quick recap, just to ensure that we understand the terminology that we're using today. What is infrastructure as code? Infrastructure as code is a way of eliminating manual error-prone changes. So it's actually automated, being able to bring it into your infrastructure changes in production. You'd be able to gain code reviews and previews of what's actually going to change, and it's automated and repeatable. It actually allows you to create things faster, and it's much more predictable in actually what it's going to change than just changing things in a web console. Pulumi believe that we are actually modern infrastructure as code. So we can create our infrastructure using real languages and layers of abstraction using your tooling, so your IDEs and your testing frameworks. We can deploy them. And we have a CLI that actually allows you to have being able to preview your changes, which integrates into your CI/CD workflows. And then we can actually manage all your code by viewing all the audit changes and all the different environments and policies and controls that come with that. There are sort of layers of how you can build your Pulumi applications. You can build on top of our base providers. So these are actually just layers of abstraction across the individual cloud providers themselves using their SDKs. And we support Azure, AWS, GCP, tools like New Relic, Datadog, Cloudflare. We have native provider for Kubernetes, which allows very in-depth interaction with Kubernetes. Then you can build libraries on top, so container libraries, serverless libraries, and infrastructure libraries. And at Pulumi, we have actually been able to demonstrate that by building a framework called Pulumi Crosswalk. So Pulumi Crosswalk is a guide, a best practice framework to allow you to build infrastructure in Amazon currently, which allows you to do things in a very simple manner, which I can actually demonstrate a little later. We allow you to deploy code from anywhere to anywhere. So we support hooking into GitHub, Atlassian, GitLab, VSTS. You can write your code in JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Go, C#, F#, VB. And we hook into our CI/CD tools, so Jenkins, Circle CI, Travis, JetBrains TeamCity. You can publish your packages to PyPy, NPM, GitHub. And of course, you can then deploy your infrastructure to Azure, AWS, Kubernetes, VMware, OpenStack, and DigitalOcean. So we do this because we can actually take advantage of real programming constructs. So right now, we are actually declarative. So even though we're using imperative applications and imperative programming languages, what we actually specify is an end state goal. So it is a declarative state. You actually, what you write as your Pulumi application will be what is deployed by Pulumi to your cloud of choice or your infrastructure of choice. We take advantage of being able to use real programming constructs. So in this case, we can see in the example that it's very easy to embed conditional logic and loops just by the fact that we're actually writing our code in TypeScript rather than actually having to inject it into Pulumi itself. We can have multi-provider workflows where the outputs of one provider is an input to another provider, which allows us to actually be able to create these interconnected services, where in this case, you create an S3 bucket and then you use that S3 bucket as part of your Kubernetes deployment. You can package your code into APIs, internal packages that can be passed around, refactored, versioned correctly, and of course, they can be tested individually so that each team can upgrade as they need to across the environment. One of the strengths that we have is our advanced orchestration. So in this case, you actually see some code that will create 3 replicas of a canary deployment of our application to Kubernetes. After we have deployed that, we then check our Prometheus API using check app metrics in order to understand that the application has been successfully deployed. When we have successfully guaranteed that the deployment has worked as expected, we can then roll out the next 10 replicas of our system. So we're really embedding a canary release workflow as part of our system because we're able to take advantage of any code that has already pre-existed. So in this case, it's actually bringing in a Prometheus package on a Prometheus API, and you're able to write your own code and talk to that. And one of the new things that has actually been added since Pulumi 2.0 is the ability to create test-driven infrastructure. So we know that when we make a request to a cloud provider, once we guarantee that the parameters that we pass to the cloud provider are what they expect, then the cloud provider will act as we need to. We don't need to test that Amazon will spin up EC2 servers on our behalf. What we actually need to do is we need to be able to ensure that the code we write to spin up the EC2 web server is correct. And we can do that in a way that you don't even need credentials on your system. So Pulumi has introduced this idea of a testing superpower in 2.0, where we can mock the responses from the cloud so that we actually intercept the request to the cloud provider. And we don't even need to be able to have credentials on our machine. We can get real unit testing validation, and we can understand in milliseconds if the code that we have written would do what we expect it to do. So let's go and run some demos because it's the easiest way to see Pulumi, and it's the best way to understand what we're trying to do. So I told you that Pulumi is a CLI tool. And even though it's a CLI tool, it has got a lot of built-in hints in order to help us understand what it does. So if I run the command Pulumi to start with, we will see that it says Pulumi, to begin working with Pulumi, run the command, run the Pulumi new command. So it will actually, at this point, tell us that it's going to be able to scaffold an application for us. So we have given some well-known applications that are scaffolded. So AWS, and we can give you examples in C#, Go, JavaScript, Python, and TypeScript. Today, I'm actually going to use AWS TypeScript. It will ask us for a project name, and I will call it Demo 1 TechStrong. It will ask for a description, and then it asks us for a stack. So Pulumi has this idea of stacks built into it. And what this actually means is this is a way of being able to deploy many instances of the same infrastructure segmented from each other. So if we think of a stack being an environment, so you would have a dev stack, a test stack, a staging stack, a production stack, but you can also have developer 1 stack, developer 2 stack, developer 3 stack, and the code can be actually revved and changed in each individual environment without interfering with the other environments and the other stacks in the process. Today, I'm just going to choose the dev stack just to build the demo. And what we can actually do is just hit enter. And then because this is an AWS, it's going to ask us, where do we want to deploy this code into? So today, I'm actually based in Ireland right now. So I'm actually going to choose EU West 1 so that we can understand that it's going to build the infrastructure in EU West 1. So it'll just install some dependencies and it'll take a second. And we have a full application. And if I open my IDE, then we can see exactly what we get as part of a Pulumi application. There we go. So we can see that we have a number of pieces of what it's trying to do. The first thing is we have a git ignore. We have some node modules. We have an index.ts, which we'll come back to, package.json, which actually brings in all the packages that it needs, a pulumi.dev.yaml. So if we think of that as pulumi.stack.yaml, so if you have prod, you'll have .prod, you'll have developer1, and then you just have the basic Pulumi understanding the application structure. So in this case, we can see that it's a Node.js application, its name, and its description. So let's have a look at index.ts. So it brings in a number of imports. So imports are like the SDKs that we have to write against. So Pulumi will have a number of helpers. AWS will have the actual AWS SDK that we have to write against. And then AWS X, which is crosswalk. And I can show you a demo of that in a second about the types of helpers and patterns that does. We see that we can declare an S3 bucket very simply. But if I have a look for another type of resource, I can say AWS dot. We can see the packages that are available. So IAM, EC2, EKS, ACM, ALBs, all of the different pieces of the cloud. And I can say EC2.instance. And of course, our IDE is immediately telling us the types of things that we need to do. Let's just stick with an S3 bucket right now so that we can actually see what Pulumi is doing as an application. So I use, Pulumi will read your credentials from your environment variables. And just to show you that if I set something in our environment variables, then it would be there. I use an application called mchain to encrypt my environment variables. So if I say mchain Pulumi AWS CI, and I say Pulumi up, then Pulumi will immediately kick into action and start to ask us, it'll be able to inspect what we have locally versus what we actually have in the cloud, and it will give me an output of what it's actually doing. So the first thing it says is it would create a stack. After it creates a stack, it would tell us it needs to create a bucket. We can have a look at the details of the bucket, and we can see something straight away. We can see that the bucket wouldn't be called my bucket. It would be called my bucket with a random string on the end. So in Pulumi, we actually auto name by default. And if we go back to our code, we can see that it's aws.s3bucket.myname. And the reason we auto name is there are a number of actions in the cloud where you can't actually make a replacement using the same name. So an S3 bucket is a perfect example. An EC2 launch configuration would be another example. You actually have to have a uniquely named resource each time. So Pulumi will enforce that by default. We can override that in the arguments because I can say bucket is TechStrong demo. And if I go and Pulumi up again, then we can actually see we've overridden the auto naming, and we can see that the bucket name will actually be specified to be TechStrong demo. It'll just take a second to make the plan. Of course, it's not always an interactive CLI. You can turn off the interactivity and you can run it in a CI mode. But for demo, this is much more effective. We can see the bucket is TechStrong demo, and we can say, yes, let's deploy that. and it will go off and deploy our bucket for us. So Pulumi will now have the state of that bucket. And when I make supplementary changes to the bucket, it will understand that it needs to make the changes to that specific bucket. So let's add some tags, and the tags will be a key value pair, and we can say managed by Pulumi, excuse me, and we can say owner is Paul Stack. And of course, our ID is giving us everything we need right there. And again, if I Pulumi up, it's going to tell us that it only needs to change the tags of the service. And we can see exactly the fact that it's only going to add the tags. And then lastly, we can Pulumi destroy, and it will target the specific destruction for that single bucket and nothing else. And I can guarantee you there are hundreds of buckets in my environment, but because Pulumi has the state, it understands exactly what it has to destroy. So let's come up with a more interesting example. Let's come up with the idea that we have to create some web servers, and we have to create a loop of some web servers. So let's copy some code that I have pre-created, and we can describe what we're doing as we go through. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a GET request to the AWS API to get an AMI ID, and it'll be for an Ubuntu 18.04 AMI. Once we have that, we can then actually create an SSH key pair. This is a test key pair that has only been created for demo purposes, and then we can create a security group. Now, usually in infrastructure as code tools, we would have to take advantage of some JSON-like or DSL-like syntax in order to create a loop. But today, we're actually going to take advantage of real programming constructs in order to do it. So I can say let web servers equals an empty untyped array, and I can say for x, excuse me, let x equals 0, x is less than 5, and I can say x plus plus, and I am immediately inside a programming loop right now. I can say web servers dot push, and we can see we're immediately taking advantage of the programming construct of the array, and we can add into it a new aws.ec2.instance. We need to give the instance a unique name, so we'll say web server dash $x. So we get web server 0, web server 1, web server 2, web server 3, web server 4, and we now need to pass in some arguments. So the first thing we need to do is pass in an AMI, and you can immediately see that I am taking advantage of the autocomplete, but also at the same time, I'm taking advantage of the fact that I'm able to get outputs further up my application to use inside programming inside the Pulumi resources further down. Then I can say key name, and it will be ssh key dot key name. I'm going to take advantage of VPC security groups, which will be an array of open security group.id. And then lastly, I need to give it an instance type. And we actually provide support for instance types to make them less stringy and more strongly typed. So I can say aws.ec2.instance types dot, and we get autocomplete of all the instance types. Let's say T3 small here. And at this point, I now have my programming construct. I can say export constant public IPs equals web servers dot map, and I can have a small lambda which says x dot public IPs, and it will actually output all of the public IPs. So in a very short period of time, we've been able to build out some real code in order to understand exactly what it's doing. But let's actually refactor this code a little more. So I can actually create a new class called webserver.ts, and we're going to push some of our logic into webserver.ts. And inside webserver.ts, I am going to do the following. Firstly, I will import star as Pulumi from @Pulumi. And then next, I will bring in the AWS library as AWS from @Pulumi AWS. I'm going to export a class. The class will be web server. And inside web server, we will return a VM, which will be an aws.ec2.instance. Our class will have a constructor. The constructor will take a name, which will be of string. It will take an AMI, typo, I apologize. It will take an AMI ID, which will also be of string, and it will take an instance type, which will be aws.ec2.instance type. So immediately we're inside our code, and inside our code, we can actually say this.vm equals new aws.ec2.instance. And here we will say that the instance name will be the constructor name that we pass in. And we need to set some parameters. So the AMI will be the AMI ID. We will pass in a key name. I can actually go and hide this logic away from the user themselves because they don't need to do this. So the key name will be key name. We can pass in the security group ID, which again will be open security group.id. And then lastly, we want to be able to take the instance name as the parameter, or the instance type, I apologize, as the parameter, and we can actually just allow that to be passed in. So back in our normal code, instead of pushing a new EC2 instance onto the web server, we can say a new web server. And we can immediately see that my code, my IDE has gone and imported the correct class that it actually requires. We're going to give it a specific name. So again, web server $0 or $X, I apologize. We need to pass in the AMI, Ubuntu AMI .id. And then lastly, we want to pass in aws.ec2.instance types .t3 small. Now, at this point, I apologize, that is not a string. That should be Pulumi input of string, because it is actually being passed as another variable from elsewhere. But we can immediately see, because I've refactored my code, that our Lambda is no longer correct because it doesn't exist in the property of web server. Web server exposes a VM, so we can say vm.public IP, and very easily we've been able to refactor our code and actually hide a layer of abstraction away from individual developers that don't need to care about the individual development. So of course we can run that Pulumi up, but it's not really going to give us anything interesting rather than what we saw before. But now let's take advantage of having a look at what Crosswalk gives us. So Crosswalk, I told you, is the ability to create layers of abstraction or predefined layers of abstraction in our infrastructure so that we can take advantage of well-known patterns and practices. For example, let's say we want to create a VPC setup in Amazon. So if you don't know Amazon, just to give you a quick recap, a VPC setup would be the VPC resource itself, a number of subnets. It would have route tables, route table associations. It would have an internet gateway. It would have elastic IPs, and NAT gateways if you were using private subnets. And to bring all those different pieces of infrastructure in, it will be quite a lot of boilerplate code. So in Pulumi, we can actually say constant VPC equals new AWS x dot ec2 dot VPC, and we can give it a name of demo VPC. And the only thing that we actually have to choose, we don't actually have to choose any individual arguments themselves. And if we go and have a look at what Pulumi is doing right now, what it's doing under the hood is it's creating a number of different resources for us. And I'll describe what they do by default. So it's telling us it needs to recreate the stack because I deleted the stack before. There's the top level AWS X VPC, and we will see all of the individual resources that it's going to create. So the first thing it's going to create is 2 private subnets, 2 public subnets. It's going to create the route tables and the route table associations for those private and public subnets. It's going to create 2 NAT gateways, which will actually allow interaction into our VPC and the elastic IPs that need to go with them. And then it will, of course, create the VPC itself. So in one line of code, it will create 31 resources that we would have had to scaffold by hand. Now, it will choose sensible defaults that go with this, but we can actually override all of those defaults that we need it to just by interacting in a number of different things. So the first thing is we can say is we can give it a CIDR block, and let's say 10.0.0.0/16. We can say enabling DNS support for the VPC, but we can enable classic link as well for the VPC if we really want to. We can actually say, we can wrap this in an async function. So let's say async function main. Let's move this code inside the async function main. And we actually want to load balance or balance our VPC across many availability zones. So we can say const azs equals aws.get availability zones. So it'll get all of the availability zones for the current region that we're actually running in, and we can await that because we can do this in an asynchronous manner. And then we can actually say that we want to create the number of availability zones for the VPC based on the azs.length, .names.length. So we want to calculate the number of availability zones in our VPC based on the number of availability zones available in our environment. We can also give it some subnets, and our subnets can actually be much more tailored. So let's think of, firstly, let's give it a type of private, and let's give it a name, which will be private demo. And of course, we can even give it a CIDR mask to go with this. And let's say that our private subnets need to be like a 20 CIDR mask. We can then also say that we want it to have public, and we'll call these ones open to the world. And we can say these CIDR masks need to be 24. I'm just choosing values just for the sake of demos here. And then we can actually go back to Pulumi, our CLI, and this time it'll actually give us a number of different outputs. So it'll give us many more resources than 31 because we're doing a number of extra things in here. Again, it's going to just, because it's doing a plan, it has no existing infrastructure. So it, I need to export the outputs. I apologize. So module.exports equals main. We actually want some level of exports here. I need to return, and I need to say VPC is VPC. There we go. So now we will say no to this one, and we will have a look at what it's going to do again. and we should see a lot more information this time. There we go. So we can actually see this time it's got 44 resources because we have created a lot more public and private subnets because we're actually balancing across the number of availability zones in the region rather than just the defined value that Pulumi would choose for us before. So let's say no to that and let's go and have a look at another part of the demo. So this time I'm going to show you why we believe Pulumi is extremely good at secret management because it's actually built into our product by default. So I need to install another one of the Pulumi packages here. It's a package called Pulumi Random, and this is a package specifically for demo purposes, just to show that we can create random strings and random names and all these different pieces, and they bring it in as part of our demo. So let's delete this code, and we can just delete the AWS stuff, and I can say import Pulumi as random from @Pulumi/random. Perfect. So let's pretend that we actually have like some secret strings and some secret data that we want to encrypt as part of an application. So how we would normally do this in any other infrastructure as code tool is you would say, like, let's create a random username, okay? Actually, let's create a random password. My password 1 equals new random.random password, okay? And it's a demo password. And in the terms of trying to adhere to good security practices, let's make it 30 characters long and include special characters. Okay, just so that we can understand what it's doing. And then what we can do is we can export my password 1 value equals my password 1. And I know from the API documentation that it stores the result in result. So let's go into Pulumi and we can say Pulumi up. And here I don't really care about seeing what it's going to do because it's demo purposes. And I can say yes to skip the command prompt, and I can skip a preview because we don't care about the plan that comes out of it. And what it will actually do is it will take an entire resource, it will create a new random password for us, and it will give us the password that's created back to the state or back to the terminal. We can inspect the Pulumi checkpoint at any time. And if I Pulumi stack export, then we can see that it's actually storing the password in plain state. Now, of course, that's not a great way of working. So Pulumi has provided us a way that we can actually stop this from happening. So if I say my password 2 equals new random password, and it'll be a demo secure password. And again, let's say length is 30, and we can say special is true. But in this case, we can take advantage of the third argument to the constructor, which is called custom resource options. So Pulumi has a number of custom resource options, and we can quickly step into the code because it is code, and we can take advantage of looking in the package and we can see what they have. So we can specify things like delete before replace, additional secret outputs, which is what we're going to look at, whether you want to import existing infrastructure with like specific cloud IDs or S3 bucket names or different pieces of information. And then also things like what its parent is. You can specify direct dependencies and ensuring that things happen in a specific order, whether you want to protect the resource to make sure that it's not deletable, whether you want to version it, alias it, whether you actually need to like target a specific provider, and then even things like adding custom timeouts and specific transformations. I'm not going to take advantage of any transformations today or aliases, but we actually can take advantage of additional secret outputs. Additional secret outputs will actually access the Pulumi secret engine. So when I ran the command Pulumi new, it created a Pulumi stack for me. But if I actually try and create an individual stack for Pulumi, then it will offer us the ability to create a secret provider as part of our Pulumi application. So we can encrypt secrets using a passphrase. We can encrypt secrets using AWS KMS, Azure Key Vault, GCP KMS, or even HashiCorp Vault, which is one of our options. Today, I'm just going to take advantage of the built-in Pulumi KMS, which actually uses AWS KMS under the hood, but it will be a specific set of encryptions for this project and this stack. So we want to pass result, which is the output from above that we saw that was unencrypted, through the secret engine. And then we can say export const my password to value equals my password to dot result. And if I go back and if I say yes to what's happening, now we will actually see that the second password that has been created will be an encrypted password. And even if we have a look in the state, so Pulumi stack export, we can see that we store an encrypted ciphertext in the state file. So even if your state file is leaked or checked into your source control, which is of course not the best thing to do, but at least we have a layer of abstraction which stops us actually leaking our secrets. So it's a very good thing that you can pass secrets through the secret engine, or whatever you deem secrets through the secret engine. And I can take advantage of passing any of the resource outputs of any Pulumi created resource through the secret engine, and it will do it. And of course, it's a list, so we can pass multiple things through. So if I say length, and if I say special, and if I go back and again run Pulumi up, then it's just setting some other variables that will store in the state file through the secrets engine. You can see no infrastructure actually changed here. But if we go back to our stack export, we will see that there's a number of other ciphertexts that are actually stored. So it's a good practice to be able to store as many pieces of information as you want. Now, as part of the Pulumi CLI, we can actually set some config values this way as well. So if I Pulumi config set my DB password, and let's say our password is a very secure password, 1234 exclamation mark. And we can now see in the Pulumi state file in the dev.yaml that by default, because Pulumi doesn't know that it has to treat it as a secret, it stores it as plain text. If I run the same command with -- secret, then it will instruct Pulumi to use the secrets provider. And if we go back, we can see that it's actually secured it using the same style encryption as the resource outputs that were created. So again, if you check in your YAML file by default, then it's not leaking secrets straight away. It's actually going to create that ability that we can hide some things away from individual users. So we try and be secret by default, and we try and ensure that there are best practices that go with that. So let's say Pulumi destroy yes, and we can destroy those resources because we don't actually need them anymore. So let's go and have a look at the last demo here. The last demo I'm going to show you is how we have been able to create helpers, especially in our TypeScript ecosystem, that make life a little easier when you're creating infrastructure. So again, let's go back and import AWS. And let's say Pulumi AWS. And usually in a live demo, it's a little bit easy because I would offer a prize for anyone who can tell me what the JSON string for an assume role in AWS is. But because, of course, we're not able to do this in a live demo, we can actually just go in and I can give you the answer. So if I say constant role equals new aws.iam.role, and we're going to say my demo role. And then a role needs an assume role policy. assume role policy is a JSON string that we've probably created hundreds of roles, but we never remember the way the string actually works. But Pulumi has created a helper, which would be called an assume role policy for a principal. The principal takes a service, and the service in this case will be ec2.amazon.aws.com. We actually have created a specific assume role policy. So, and this will give us the correct JSON. Now, if I go and have a look at what that does for us, so in 5 lines of code, it's actually going to create the correct JSON string for us. And we should be able to see it when we create the JSON string in the state file, because the Pulumi understands that it needs to convert that to a JSON string to pass to Amazon. And we can have a look at what it's doing under the hood. So it is creating the correct string that goes with it. Now, of course, that's extremely useful, but let's even go a little further than this. So usually in infrastructure management, we have some well-known policies that we need to create. So these are policies that allow us to take advantage of EKS in Amazon, for example. And to create these and attach them to the role, you would normally have to specify individual policy attachments. But because we're in real languages, we can actually say let count equals 0. And we can say for const policy of managed policy ARNs. And we're immediately inside a loop right now. I can say const RPA, which is a role policy attachment, equals new aws.iam.role policy attachment. We need to give it an individual name, because of course Pulumi needs multiple resources to be individually named in the state file. So I can say my RPA dash dollar count plus plus. So we know that we iterate over and each time increment it. And then we can say policy ARN, and the policy ARN would be managed policy ARNs. Excuse me, I take that back. It will be policy. And then lastly, we can say role. And because we're in a typed language, in this case, we're in TypeScript, role would be usually the role policy to be applied to. So it doesn't really help us by understanding if it's the ARN or if it's the ID or the name. But in a typed language, we can actually pass the entire role that we created earlier in our program. And if I go and have a look at what that's going to do, it is going to tell us that it's going to create the role, and then it's going to attach 3 policies to that role after the role has been created, because of the relationship between role and role policy. So it will tell us in a second. There we go. My role policy 0, 1, and 2. Now, of course, these strings are painful in order to remember. So again, Pulumi has created helper library. So manage policies dot, and we can actually add any strings that we require. And in this case, let's just choose 2 random ones. And next time we run Pulumi up, it'll tell us that it needs to add 2 more policies and 2 more role policy attachments to attach 2 new roles to the system. And it will actually give us the output that it needs to create 3 and 4 based on the numbering in the loop. There we go, 3 and 4, and notice that it's a random order that it assigns them, because there are no relationships between the role policy attachments themselves, so they can actually all be done asynchronously rather than one at a time. And then the last sort of thing that we can attach to the role itself, or the last sort of area about IAM policy management is specific policies that you can attach to like resources like S3 buckets. We have a well-known policy document format that we have to adhere to. So we've provided you a helper that will allow you to adhere to that. So if I could say const my policy, which is of type aws.iam.policy document, and that is it'll have a number of things. Firstly, it'll have a version. Now, notice my ID is telling me that there are 2 options in the version here right now. So let's take the first one. And that is a valid string. Now, if I took that away and made it 2013, then my ID immediately tells me it's not a correct version, because we know that it's specified as part of the policy document. A policy also has a number of statements. So in this case, I'm going to create a SID. So let me just say my SID, just for the purposes of what's going on. It has an effect. The effect will be allow or deny. Let's say allow. Then we have a principal. I'm just going to adhere to star for now. Please don't do this in production, because your policy document should be much more targeted than just stars. The action would be, let's say, s3.star again. And lastly, the resource itself would be, we'll just say star for now. Now, this is a valid policy that can be applied to any piece of resource that will allow it to talk to S3, for example. But we can very easily change that. But if we have something like not effect, then if somebody spelled that wrong, then our IDE is telling us before we even try to go to Amazon that it's not correct. And we can take that policy and we can say const my bucket equals new aws.s3.bucket. And we can say my demo bucket. And we can say that the policy that we want to apply would be my policy. And no JSON was harmed in the making of this demo, because we can actually see that it's going to apply the correct JSON structure to the bucket itself, because we can get it in the Pulumi output of exactly what it's trying to do. Give me it 1 second. There we go. We can have a look at the details, and we can actually see that the correct JSON structure is being passed into the bucket because Pulumi understands what it needs to do under the hood. So for us, Pulumi is extremely powerful to do a number of different things, and we can take advantage of a lot of different areas. Pulumi has a lot of customers right now using this and successfully using this in a lot of well-known names. And we're pretty happy with some of the different pieces that we're actually creating. The layers of abstraction you can take advantage of. And for us, we believe it is the easiest way to program the cloud. And thank you very much. A small recap is Pulumi gives you modern infrastructure as code. It uses real languages and the tooling that you already use in order to apply correct programming and engineering practices to your infrastructure. For too many years, infrastructure has been scripted, it's been hacked, and it's been difficult to maintain and difficult to pass amongst teams. We believe that infrastructure is actually real living code, and it should allow developers and operators to work together to build everything that it needs to. And we believe that it allows you to manage complexity because we can target abstractions that allow us to actually take away the choices of public, private, or hybrid clouds. That can be taken care of by your infrastructure management teams in your organization. So I thank you for your time. If you have any other questions, you can either tweet me at Stack72, or you can get in contact with me at paul@pulumi.com. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks to Paul from Pulumi. That was a great session at TechStrong Con. It's that time of the show now, though, where we'll do the news. This is the roundup of the news around the MediaOps neighborhood sites. Let's jump to them. Over on DevOps.com, we have actually something from TechStrong TV. Imagine that. It's my interview with Brad Feld about his new book, The Startup Community Way. You know, Brad's been a friend a long time and a mentor, and was happy to see him, happy to speak with him. Really happy about the book. I have it on Kindle, and it's a good book. Continuing, you know, in the whole startup community series. Also on DevOps.com, we have skills every DevOps professional needs to succeed. VMware extends DevOps reach. VMware has put a big push into being a player within the DevOps space, and cloud native as well. And then we have news about an update from Accurix, excuse me. Actually, I believe it is Accurix. We've had several interviews with the Accurix folks, and they've updated their security tool for developers, cloud security engineering. Over on Container Journal, we have an update from our friends at Red Hat as they've updated their Kubernetes portfolio. New Vector updates their container security platform, and the case for containerized cloud architecture, security and scale amid COVID-19. That's a good one over on Container Journal. Over on Security Boulevard, we have Garbage In, Gospel Out, the security problem of data accuracy. It's a fun article. Check that out. And then establishing a secure long-term workforce outside the four walls. I think that's something we're all kind of grappling with right now. But anyway, as usual, it's not supposed to be an exhaustive list. It's some of the headlines we have over on the neighborhood sites today. Check those out. But there's a lot more on there. Now, though, it's time to head over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. And Charlene's guest today is Ali Parker from Redgate Software. Redgate's Coding Club has caught on with the 6 to 14-year-old set. Here's how to get started. Couldn't think of a better audience. And also, Charlene will have a webinar preview of the rest of the week's webinars here on Media Ops. Check those out. There's some good ones, including one I'm doing tomorrow on what's more of a roundtable with audience participation on Dev Everything Ops with an amazing cast of panel members. So please tune into that. But here now is Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at Media Ops, and I am here now with Ali Parker, who is a technical lead at Redgate Software. Hey Ali, how are you? Thanks so much for joining me today.
No problems. Thanks for inviting me on.
All right, great. Well, I want to talk to you about Redgate Software's initiative to kind of get the kids engaged with coding during the stay-at-home enforcement period, if you will, the pandemic. And I'm just so jazzed about this idea because I think it's such a it just is such a great project, and there's so many kids who could benefit from this, especially when they're quarantined in their houses. But tell me a little bit, how did you guys come up with the idea of starting this?
Well, it all came from my son, Dougie. So at school, he's doing Code Club, and Code Club is a part of the Raspberry Pi Foundation.
Okay.
So they're a charity, so they run these things. They help people teach kids to code. They've got loads of great exercises and things. And he'd been doing it at school, and as soon as lockdown happened, he was going to miss doing his coding club. He's like, oh, does that mean I don't get to do Code Club anymore? And I said, oh, okay, why don't we see if I can organize something? And so I went into work, and I had a chat with a couple of my mates and said, what do you think about maybe starting to do a little code club for some of the other Redgaters children? We can do a bit of that. We can, keep our kids entertained at the very least. Mm-hmm. So we started with that idea, and before long, people were saying, hey, maybe we should just put this out to the public and see who's interested. And, we've got quite a few followers on Twitter as Redgate. I don't have many followers, unfortunately, but Redgate's got lots. And we put it out, and it just seemed to go absolutely mad. I mean, what started as, oh, maybe we'll just run it for 10 kids for Redgaters, by the next morning became 1,000 signups of kids.
Wow.
From all over the world as well, right? So not just US and Europe, but we had kids in India and Sri Lanka and in the Middle East and stuff as well had signed up. By lunchtime, we were up like 2,000 signups for this thing, at which point I started freaking out quite a lot.
Yeah. Well, I can imagine if you don't really have the infrastructure to support 2,000 kids all logging in via Zoom or something like that. That seems like I think I probably would go even grayer than I am now. But so how did you guys deal with it then? I mean, it seems like you guys hit the ground running.
Well, I mean, it was great. We had such a great response, and one of the great things about working at Redgate is how much freedom we're given and how much we're encouraged to just go and give back to the community, you know. So when I gave a shout out on Slack just saying, so it turns out we've got quite a lot of people want to go to Code Club. If we've got any more volunteers to help out, maybe we can split this into a few sessions. So we split into beginners, intermediate, and more advanced. So the first two doing Scratch, and then the last one doing some Python as well, which was kind of fun. We had a ton of people offer up. So we were running 6 sessions every Friday in the end, which was really nice. And we ended up talking to Code Club as well, because we sort of got in contact saying, hey, we've had this huge response. We want to use your materials to do it. We can help you out, share your name a little bit as well. And I was surprised to get a phone call from the director of Code Club UK, which was just amazing. My son was super happy to kind of hear from her, and essentially we just set it all up on Zoom. We used Zoom webinars, spoke to our IT department and got our maximum number of people bumped to 500, and it was quite full on. There was quite a lot of safeguarding that we had to take into account as well, obviously, around, it's you talking to other people's children. We want to make sure people aren't sharing their videos and sound and that kind of stuff. But we managed to work our way through all that and make sure we were safeguarding appropriately, and making sure we could share some really cool stuff with the kids.
That's really great. So what's the age range for this coding club?
Oh, so we had everything. I was really surprised. We had sort of 6 through to 14. There was a lot. What was really nice to see was the proportion of people. So we asked up front, has your child done any programming, and have you done any programming? And we had something like 40% of people, of kids who were signed up, had parents who had never done any programming either. So they were both starting from scratch together in front of the computer, which was great. A real large proportion was 6 through 8 as well. I mean, that was like 60% of the kids that were coming along with that kind of age group.
So is this something that, obviously we're in the summertime now and school's out, but is this something that you guys have continued? And if you're not doing it over the summer, do you guys plan to maybe start it up again after the school year officially starts?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're having a little break because it was kind of an intense 17 weeks of lockdown doing Code Club. We just recently published our end of term report. So there's a few things on our blog about that, about how we did, how many students, like unique students we had and things like that. So we're taking a break at the moment, and we're trying to think about how we can carry this forward next year. I mean, we might actually flip it around in a way, because we noticed when the school started going back, we started losing quite a lot of people because they were in school instead of listening to us, who've never taught anybody before. But yeah, maybe we'll flip it around and we could start doing it in the holidays instead of doing it during term time, if you know what I mean. Because then the kids are there, they're at home. I'm sure parents would love to see them doing something other than playing Minecraft or Fortnite for a change.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see what happens.
That's great. I mean, I would think that students, even if they are going back to school, actually going to physical schools, that this would be something that they would really be interested in keeping up, because it is something different to look forward to, and so many kids these days kind of live their lives on the computer. And to your point, there's between Roblox and Minecraft and the games such as Fortnite, I know that there's some coding going on, especially with Roblox and Minecraft, but beyond that, I'm not sure it's a real learning experience for them. So I think any chance that the kids can have to actually put their computers to good use, I think is always a good thing, and I'm sure parents would agree with me with that. I think it's an awesome endeavor that you guys have started, and I hope that you have much success with it in the future. Are you guys planning on maybe working with school districts in the future to kind of pull this together, even maybe after the kids do go to school to the physical buildings, and maybe make it an after-school program or something like that?
Absolutely. We're just keying into what Code Club already does across the world. I mean, we were using a lot of their resources to help us get going and taking the kids through that kind of stuff. And like I said, Redgate actually encourages us all to personally give back. So it's not necessarily a Redgate sponsored thing, but I get a charity day every year that I can use. And I mean, I don't have to use it as a day, but I'm sure I would be encouraged to take up running one of these code clubs more regularly at our schools. And I would encourage other parents to look to other guardians and things, because it's not that hard to set these things up. You get so much great support from them. And yeah, I'm looking forward to thinking how we can do some more, especially with my local school that I can see out the window that my son's hopefully going back to in September. I would love to get more involved there and help more people just get some experience of it. I mean, we had so much great feedback from the parents who were just surprised at, oh, it's really not that hard. And actually it was really fun. And we sat together for an hour after the lesson and continued to just play about with things and change stuff. You know, I think there's this preconception that with coding, you have to get it exactly right or it won't work. But what's great about things like Scratch is how much freedom the kids can have to kind of just change the project a bit. It's like, oh, it says I need to use a parrot. I don't want to use a parrot. I want to use a polar bear. Or, you know, oh no, I don't want it to jump like 10 pixels high. I want it to jump 100 pixels high. What happens? What happens if I ask it to jump minus 10 pixels? They can just poke the thing and just play with it. It's so much fun to see the little light bulbs going on in the kids and the parents' faces. You know, it's really great.
That is really great, and I applaud you guys for coming up with the idea, and I applaud your son for poking you to get to it. So great stuff. Well, Ali, I would love to have a conversation with you maybe in about 6 or 8 months or so and see how the program is going, how you guys have made it work even through the school year, or, you know, to your point, maybe switching it over to the holiday breaks. But would love to get an update with you later on.
That'd be great. I'd love to speak to you again.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it.
No problems.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, Managing Editor at MediaOps, and I am here now with the webinar previews for Tuesday, the Tuesday edition, if you will. Okay, we got, as always, we have so many great webinars coming up on DevOps.com. So here are the 3 that are coming up soon that I thought you guys might be totally interested in. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right to them. The first one is happening tomorrow, Wednesday, August 19th at 3 p.m. Eastern. This one is sponsored by GitLab, and it's called Optimize Your CI/CD with GitLab and AWS. The folks at GitLab are going to talk about how GitLab and AWS are working together to provide kind of a best-of-breed deployment workflow and a solid application infrastructure for doing DevOps. And so if you you are working with GitLab and interested in possibly joining your GitLab and your AWS infrastructure goodness together, maybe this webinar is worth checking out for you. The second one I want to let you guys know about is happening Thursday, August 20th at 8 a.m. Eastern. Again, this one is on DevOps.com, and it's called The Journey from Heroku to Kubernetes in 5 Steps. This webinar is sponsored by Fairwinds, and it focuses on how organizations can move beyond Heroku over to Kubernetes as they grow their application development efforts, and do that without impacting developer productivity or application performance. If you're a growing organization and you've outgrown Heroku and are considering moving over to Kubernetes, Fairwinds is giving you the 5 steps you need to know to be able to do that effectively and successfully. So give this one a look if you are looking to grow your application development efforts and do it in a Kubernetes environment. All right, the third webinar I wanted to let you guys know about is happening Thursday, August 20th as well. This one is happening at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. It's called 0 to 100 million downloads, building a modern open source CI project. This one is sponsored by Harness, and this one is really kind of interesting because it focuses on the origins of Drone, which is an open source CI technology that was designed to be kind of easier to use and have a lower bar of entry than other applications, and really how it's evolved to become what is now Harness CI. So if you have any familiarity with Drone, if you've worked with it in the past, you're well familiar with the technology. If you're not, definitely a story worth checking out. So again, this one is happening Thursday, August 20th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. All right, to sign up for any of these webinars, just go over to devops.com/webinars, look in the upcoming section, and you will see all of the webinars that we have coming up, not just the the 3 that I've talked about in today's webinars preview. We have a ton of them. So hopefully you guys will be able to make some time and see some of the webinars. Until then, please stay safe, everybody, and I'll see you on Thursday with the next edition of the webinars preview.
Charlene, thanks so much. Great interview with Ali Parker. Thanks for the preview on the webinars. Do tune in for our Dev Everything Ops Roundtable tomorrow webinar. It's going to be a good one. Now, though, well, let's go over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch. It's Mitchell Ashley, CEO, founder of Accelerated Strategies Group, and Mitch will actually be on the Dev Everything Ops panel tomorrow. Mitch, take it away.
Welcome to Analyst Corner. Mitch Ashley, CEO of the Accelerated Strategies Group. It's a fascinating time to be in our industry, maybe a scary time if you're looking for a job, and I wish you the best. And hopefully mentors and friends can help each other connect with jobs and opportunities. And that's actually one of the things I want to talk about today is some of the folks that helped start MediaOps, the folks behind DevOps.com, have launched a new service called RecruitOps, new site, RecruitOps.com. I definitely would check it out. This is built by people who are very experienced at hiring technical staff, technical developers, bringing them on board and running teams of folks, working with recruiters as hiring managers. So it kind of combines the best world, from the staffing professionals to recruiters to hiring managers and all that expertise, people that are really good at all those things. So I'm excited about that service and see what that can do for both people that are hiring jobs, and we know there are folks hiring, whether it be developers, security people, operations, whatever it might be, to the folks looking for work. So please check that out at recruitops.com. Also want to talk about some research that we have underway and some research that's upcoming. We've initiated some work around Kubernetes security. Now, if you pay attention to any webinar, virtually half the articles on software architecture and security, they're always talking about either API security or Kubernetes security. So those are hot topics given how widely Kubernetes is being adopted, and moving to microservices architecture, service mesh, serverless, etc. So we have much more porous kind of, I don't want to say brittle porous, but I mean porous as in many more entry points into applications since they aren't monoliths anymore. So you really can't protect them just from the outside. So there's some really interesting research underway of where organizations are in their own understanding as well as adoption, and what some of those adoption strategies are for protecting specifically data within containers. We think about data at rest and encrypted on the disk and all of those things. Of course, now we're living in a virtual world and we're using services to do all those things. But as that layer has gotten virtualized, and now we're using that data, if you will, in containers and both also kind of communicating across APIs between microservices. There's a lot of places for good security to be put in place, and maybe from folks that this is kind of new, maybe making some of the mistakes other folks have already made and corrected because they've been using containers and Kubernetes container management for a while. So I'd really appreciate it. Your input would be super valuable, and we'd frankly be honored if you would participate in contributing your thoughts on where you are and your organization is on understanding and implementing strategies for Kubernetes security. You could take that by going to the Accelerated Strategy site, which is accelst.com. If you just scroll down past the hero just a little bit, you'll see the survey and be able to take it there. And we also have some other really interesting research we're just about to kick off. So to give you a heads up on this, I don't know about you, I've seen every day, it seems like I see a new survey someone completed about working from home. And, that was so 3 months ago, maybe 5 months ago when it comes to the pandemic. And while it's interesting, there's some really good data, and I've seen things, everything from furniture manufacturers to kind of thinking how they retool the office to HR perspective on working from home and some of the unique needs that might bring with it. There's a completely different perspective that we've taken on this question, which is that there are groups who have already been working from home for quite some time. And not only working from home, but working remote, whether it be cafes, coffee shops, on airplanes. And I'm talking about software developers, right? With the advent of Git and source code management systems, where you can really take so much of the information with you and really and create a virtual development environment around your laptop, software infrastructure, code, development tools, data and databases. I mean, you can do so much just on your own laptop without being connected necessarily, at least for some time. But oftentimes you are connected when you are sitting in a cafe or coffee shop. So my point is, the approach that we're taking is those people already know how to work from home. They already know how to work remote. They've already kind of figured out many of the collaborative tools. And maybe they didn't spend every minute on Zoom like we do today, or whatever teleconferencing system that you use, meeting system, but they sure did a lot of communications. So we're taking that perspective and looking out. So kind of bottom up, if you will, or developer out, and looking at how the rest of the organization has reacted during the changes in how we operate with remote work, what some of the impact has been, both positive and negative, and where there may be some learnings and experience that the development community could share more broadly with those that are maybe less familiar with remote situations and remote work. So I'm excited that will be getting underway this week. You'll see an announcement about that and be able to contribute your thoughts and ideas. So I encourage every software developer, every development team, everyone connected with IT, and or if you've already been doing remote work yourself, even if you're not in those roles, that would be interesting. And then the other perspective, folks that this is new to, and what's your perspective looking at software teams, understanding how they work, or maybe not, and seeing what might be valuable, what they may be able to bring to the table for you personally, your team, and your leadership. So that'll be very exciting and very interesting to do. Third thing I want to bring up this is kind of a shout out day. So we have a new series, several new series. We have CISO Talks, CIO Talks, and we have this new series called DevOps Unbound that I'm part of. And I get to, I don't know if I'm quite co-host, but I get to participate beyond with Alan. It's sponsored by Tricentis. And you're starting to see more of this kind of content, not only from us, but it's starting to emerge elsewhere. But, my focus is on, not slideware, but how do we impart knowledge? Not 80-page reports, but how do we impart knowledge? And that's why we do the things we do with our research, which is, we may hand you a 10-page report or a 2-page summary, but we're going to give you lots of videos and lots of avenues to see people talking about the results of that research and what it means and what you might take away from it or what others are taking away from it. So we're launching this new DevOps Unbound, which is kind of that. It's just this different format of let's bring in subject matter experts. We're centering it primarily around IT, around software, DevOps, and other topics. But these are, really well-known for folks that you may hear on other presentations at summits and events, online events. I'm trying to have some really meaningful conversation. I know when I've sat in on some of those and listened to some of the kind of maybe similar things on the net, and sorry, not to be critical of other people's stuff, but you learn from it. And one of the things I've learned is, just sort of dancing around the subject is really frustrating. And I hear that at times where people don't want to jump into the details, don't want to jump into how they really feel about it and express opinions. And I can tell you, the folks that are on DevOps Unbound got some strong opinions about stuff, which is great, even if they disagree, especially if they disagree with me. That's some of the best conversations. And frankly, I learn and take away so much from those, and I think other people do. At least that's what they tell me. So if you want to tune in to see me wrong about something, that's a great place to do it, because I promise you, if not today, it'll happen another day, or maybe multiple times a day. Who knows? Point being, it is that kind of conversation. And I have no problem challenging other people when I have a different view, and that happens a fair amount. And folks will kind of take me on. But that's also when you come to it from different perspectives. If you might have a CISO on, and you have a security product person on, and you have someone who's been a practitioner, been a product person, and now an analyst like myself, kind of looking at it from multiple sides. You even had multiple analysts on some conversations. So I'm excited about a lot of the programming that'll come up, and hopefully that's enticed you enough to check it out. There are some available already. We've already had some episodes on TechStrong TV, and you'll see those future ones advertised. You can also go to TechStrong.tv and check out previous DevOps Unbound episodes. I think they're also on DevOps.com with a transcript now, so you can read them if you're not in a place where you want to watch a video. There was one recently that Alan, I think was the inaugural one, if I remember, either that or the second one. Alan Schimmel had Grigory Melnick and James Bach with Tricentis and Satisfice, respectively. So check that out. I think you'll really enjoy some of the new things that we're trying to bring meaningful and valuable, not just content, but knowledge to you. And not just from ourselves, but other people who are maybe even more of an expert than we are in some cases. Or combined, we bring a unique perspective. And I think that's what happens through some of these online activities. Certainly the content world is changing. It's not the world of just read your eWeek magazine. That's going back a ways. And that's kind of your news for the month or for the week, depending on which one you were reading. And now we're just overrun by so much content. I don't have time to read it all, but I do have time to listen in, read the few things that I want to read, but listen to other stuff going on. Sometimes just have it on in the background and catch something interesting, back it up, listen to it again, or watch it live streaming. So it's a lot of fun participating and doing this, as well as doing some of the research and working with customers that we get to work with. So I'm signing off on this one. Shout out day is over. I won't promote any others, but I thought those were some interesting things for you to check out. But thanks for listening in.
Thanks, Mitchell. Great stuff. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, we have our channel roundup with Mike Vizard. Mike's guest today is Lachlan Donald of BuildKite, and they're breaking some big news. Over to you, Mike.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey guys, thanks from the studio. We're here with Lachlan Donald, who's the CEO of BuildKite, a CI/CD platform, and they just raised $20 million. They have a nifty valuation for $200 million. Lachlan, now that you've bought a beer for everybody in the company, I'm sure you had to email them a coupon for that because there's social distancing, but what's next for the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to quickly recap what BuildKite does, we build CI/CD tools that help development teams iterate quicker and change the world. And we've been particularly successful in high-growth SaaS companies. So we built BuildKite because we thought that CI/CD was broken for high-growth companies, and that's really played out in the sort of customers that we've succeeded with. Shopify, Wayfair, Cruise, PagerDuty. So what's next for us really is more of what's made us successful, which is working really closely with our customers. We're customer obsessed and hyper focused on trying to understand the needs of high growth tech companies. And so we want to bring that to engineering teams around the world. We believe that BuildKite really is the only CI/CD tool that you need across your company. And we've raised this money to bring on some amazing partners and help us tell the world that.
What differentiates BuildKite? Because the concept of CI/CD has been around for a while, of course, and there are a lot of players in this space. So how is it that you're making traction right now?
Yeah, look, it's a really good question. It's the same one that I asked in the early days. So I came to BuildKite as a customer of BuildKite before I was a co-founder, and so kind of had the perspective of a CTO. And so, look, there's a few things that really differentiate BuildKite. We built BuildKite because we thought that CI/CD was broken for high growth tech companies, and the areas where we think that it's broken, the set of trade-offs that the previous solutions had forced you into either on-prem or cloud. And so the downsides of that was that you had to really choose between scale or security. And so BuildKite was built from the ground up to be cloud native. And to be the one tool that you could use across your whole business. So technology agnostic, but then most importantly, the right set of security compromises. So BuildKite has a hybrid architecture, which means that we don't ever see customers' source code or secrets, but we still run our control plane as a SaaS product, which means we can have unlimited scale. And I think it's really the unlimited scale that has attracted our customers. So Shopify is a really good example. So they came to us when they were 300 engineers. And so they'd been through every CI/CD tool under the sun, trying to find something that would meet their scaling needs. So the analogy that I often think of is our competitors on their pricing page will have a concurrency slider, which kind of maxes out at like 50. And so Shopify is running up to 20,000 concurrent jobs. And concurrent jobs in the CI/CD world is the main driver of how quickly you can move. So, as tech companies get bigger and more complicated, they have these really big test suites. And when you start out, they take seconds. But when you're a Shopify or a Wayfair or a Culture Amp, those test suites take up to hours. And so the magic number that we're all trying to get these test suite runs to is under 5 minutes. So research shows that's kind of the point where developers get distracted and go off and do something else. So the way that you get it to under that number is you slice up that test suite into lots of pieces and you fan it out to the cloud. So that's what BuildKite was built to do. And so to that end, we think that fast builds are good builds, and the only way to do that is to be able to dial up your scale as high as you need to go.
So you're kind of a cure for attention deficit disorder among developers. Is that where you're going?
We like to think of it that we give developers more time to focus on doing things that are important rather than building their tools.
Okay. Are you going to continue to grow everything organically within the company, or might you think about some inorganic acquisitions? And how do you think of adjacent categories?
Yeah, I think it's we often say that BuildKite is a different shaped company. So we built one of the ideas when we started BuildKite was that we wanted to create a different shaped organization that was more focused on creating an enduring business that we loved working in. We all came from high growth VC backed companies and we loved those, but we wanted to do something different with BuildKite. That was, aside from being really focused on our product and our customers, also caring deeply about the people that work for us and growing sustainably. So we have a mantra which we kind of use to focus our decisions around how we grow and how we invest and how we change. And that's people, planet, profit in that order. So that's kind of the lens that we're bringing to kind of this fundraise and how we grow in future. So we think a lot of this raise has been almost less about capital and more about finding amazing partners. So the folks that we've brought in OpenView, General Catalyst, and we've had the founders of Datadog invest. We've really looked for people who are makers, who care very much about building the best tools, and that really care about the craft of that, because that's at the heart of what we do. So that's kind of what's next for us. Is we want to keep building what we think is the best CI/CD tool in the world, and we want to help more companies fall in love with their CI/CD tool again.
What's your take on the current economic downturn and what the impact that might have on people's appetite for building applications faster, or are they kind of pulling in their horns a little bit?
Yeah, it's I think it's a difficult question. It's the one we're all asking ourselves. I think the answer is unevenly distributed. Some industries have definitely been hit worse than others. So the really interesting trend that we've seen, though, is that it's, I mentioned before that our observation is that how companies approach continuous delivery is a really good litmus test for how good they are at executing and, driving forward as successful businesses. So what the interesting aspect to that is that we've seen a lot of companies more quickly undergo digital transformation. So as companies have had to go online and remote, it's pushed them towards having to focus on having better tooling and having to do more with less. And so tools like BuildKite and other amazing developer tools have actually kind of boomed in those times in a lot of ways. So, which is frankly for BuildKite been a good thing internally. It's, I'm sure is same with all of us. It's hard watching the world go through what it's going through. And I think that each of us, kind of needs to find something that we can make a difference on. And for BuildKite, it's been feeling like we play a part in kind of helping and uplifting companies like Shopify and Wayfair so that they can keep the world running.
All right. So the great news is you didn't lose your job. The bad news is all your deadlines have been moved up by 6 months, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
What is your sense of the marketplace and how stable it is? Because it seems like there's a lot of consolidation in the DevOps space, and yet the overall category continues to grow. So do people need to think twice about what platform they're betting on, and how do they evaluate a platform for the long haul?
Yeah, I think that there's this constant cycle of consolidation into platforms versus single tools. Our philosophy has always been that the best crafted tool wins in the long term on that front. And especially CI/CD. Like we see CI/CD is so critical to helping businesses grow and scale. We think that it is always a good investment to pick the tool that is going to be able to grow with your company. And that's really what BuildKite was built to do, is a tool that you can take on as a small team, and it works great for you, and then it will grow with you as you turn into, you 10x and 10x again. And so I think that's what we've seen with the consolidation plays, is that it's really difficult to scale with companies, because it's really hard to not have a tool that is inflexible in a lot of ways. So, we think there's room for both, though, fundamentally. Like, we think it's a really big market. Building amazing software and helping amazing software companies move fast is a big space, thankfully.
What is your sense of the impact of everybody working remotely? It seemed initially that we kind of thought that this was going to be some sort of extended snow day and we'd all be back in the office in a month or so. And now it feels like our teams are going to be permanently working from home in a lot of cases. What kinds of challenges does that put on application development and DevOps processes? And what have you seen customers respond with?
Yeah, we've all gotten real good at talking on Zoom all day. BuildKite has been a remote first company since we started. So that's been kind of a huge advantage to us, is that we haven't, we've kind of, the rest of the world has sort of caught up in terms of like the remote first thing. But it's been really interesting, some of the trends that we've seen in customers. Like, with the examples that come to mind of like the really practical things that have changed for folks is all of these organizations with servers in their offices, all of a sudden going into remote first worlds, to have realized that that's a really difficult workflow. So, for mobile developers and, hardware developers who are relying on kind of servers underneath their desks or adjacent in their offices, have really had to move forward with moving to the cloud. So that's definitely been a trend that we've seen pretty strongly.
Okay, great. Hey, we're also seeing a big shift with so-called cloud native technologies and containers and Kubernetes. Is that going to change the way we think about app dev? And is that creating a seminal moment where people are thinking about the platform? Because a lot of people are heavily invested in legacy platforms they have already, right?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of kind of the containerization world and what it does for, especially around like application deployment and testing. So, but I think that the software space is so much bigger than that. BuildKite was built to be technology agnostic. So, our architecture and the way that it's different is that we give customers a small agent that they can run on their infrastructure. So whether that's AWS, whether that's a Kubernetes stack, whether that's Mac minis, or whether it's like an IoT device or a self-driving car. So it means that with BuildKite, you can put the workload right adjacent to whatever your technology stack is. So I think that choosing a platform that focuses on one specific like cloud native environment doesn't work for most organizations, let alone the big enterprises, that have 40 different types of operating environments. So I think that when you're talking about like developer productivity and CI/CD especially, you want something that you can use everywhere. You want something that you can use to bring all the disparate pieces together and help your team work on one platform and be able to iterate quickly.
Right. So people will be building microservices-based applications and monolithic apps side by side, and it's not going to be all or nothing one way or the other.
Exactly. We our philosophy on kind of how we approach our product is that we're unopinionated. So, we work with some of the best tech companies in the world, and each one of them has a different like workflow, technical environment. And so BuildKite is built to empower them to make those workflows more efficient and to work the way they want to work. And we think that's critical. I think that you need to pick a tool that won't tell you what to do.
All right. What's your best advice to people, other than, of course, going to visit your website and downloading some demo? But, right now it's a seminal moment. The economy is changing. The tech is changing. The way we use it is changing. So in the face of all this change, what's your best advice to IT guys right now?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think my best advice is focus on doing what you love, and find a way to translate that into what you build, and build things that make a difference. That's what we think is important.
All right, do something you love, and you never work a day in your life, right?
Yep.
All right. Hey, Lachlan, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, Mike.
And guys, back to you in the studio.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Thanks, Mike. Great stuff there. Congratulations to BuildKite. That's going to wrap it for today, folks. Hope you have a great Tuesday. We will be back with fresh content on Thursday. We will be replaying a vintage TechStrong TV, vintage, it's 80 shows strong, tomorrow, and be back fresh, as I say, on Thursday. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel. Be safe, be well, be strong, TechStrong. We'll see you soon.